Audrey is.
Shalom Aleichem. Y'all are something else. You know that. This class is something else. Me and Jason, we just have to start the class and hope that you'll fall in line as we go. Okay. So let's study for a few minutes, and not just to benefit ourselves, but to please Hashem that we study His Torah. And we have been in a study for a little while now because of Pat, who twisted my arm and forced me into making a study on Pirkei Avot, the chapters of the Fathers, a tractate of the Mishnah. And we have been using mainly the commentary of the great Maharal of Prague, Rabbi Judah Loew of Prague. According to the editor who put it all together for us was Rabbi Tuvia Basser. It's this book here. We're on page 43, and the last time we were together, actually we were in the process of discussing Mishnah number 12, which is chapter 1 of it, number 12, which says Hillel and Shammai received the tradition from them, and Hillel says, be among the disciples of Aharon, loving peace and pursuing peace, loving people and bringing them closer to the Torah. And we're on page 43 where we had just got to the last comments, actually, of the Maharal. I think we're in the right place. Pat will tell me if we're not.
Yes, we are.
Okay. Where he comments on loving peace and pursuing peace. And he says these are two different things. Loving peace refers to actually preventing people having fights, disputes from arising in the first place, stopping it. But the phrase pursuing peace, verodef, and by the way, this also can be translated, I find this is interesting when I take Christian people to Israel, and we get to, we talk about, where Yeshua is talking about, where he says, if you are persecuted for righteousness, yeah. But actually, if we put those words into Hebrew, it's the same thing that Hillel says here. In other words, I think he's saying, because immediately after that, he again repeats this same theme. Why would he say it twice? So I think basically he's talking about this very Jewish concept that every morning when we wake up, we have to rodef, we have to chase after. It's in the case of the New Testament, it's being translated as persecuted. But really it's the same word that Hillel is using, pursuing. You have to pursue righteousness. You have to chase after righteousness. Just a side thought that came to my brain. But anyway, the phrase pursuing peace, where he says, verodef shalom, to chase after peace, he says this actually refers to restoring a harmonious relationship. In other words, restoring a relationship if two people got in a fight and were no longer speaking to each other. These are not easy jobs, by the way, that Hillel the Great is referring to here. And most people don't even try to even get into these jobs because you can get damaged in the process of trying to do either one of these things. Either preventing disputes from arising or trying to bring two parties together to reconcile. Okay? He says Hillel actually uses the term pursuing, rodef, in this context because people who fight, people who quarrel, they keep at a distance from each other. And anything that's at a distance, he says, requires pursuit. Well, we can put that back on the idea of righteousness also, that it's at a distance from us, so we have to chase after it. It's not going to fall on our heads. We have to go after it, is the idea. And then the Maharal makes an interesting comment here, and we're not going to completely go into it because it has to do with how the spiritual worlds operate. He says the ability to restore peace is so characteristic of Kedusha. Kedusha means holiness, that peace, shalom, is one of God's names. Well, that's a nice thing to actually know, that shalom is a name of God. And since Kedusha, he says, lies in the spiritual realm, holiness lies in the domain of the spiritual worlds, and that means it's outside of the constraints of time Then peacemakers, he says, or peacemaking must be undertaken. In other words, don't wait. You have to do it with no time, instantly. He says, with instant pursuit, he says, because this befits it, because it's a spiritual endeavor. It's something that, and he's making all kinds of this, just to read his words in this English that we have here from Rabbi Basser, doesn't do it justice what he is trying to talk about. He's trying to talk about, first we have to understand the concept that everything that happens in the physical realm is either the result of something happening in the spiritual realms or it causes something to happen in the spiritual realm, okay? So when people are far apart here, that causes the counterpart, the roots that are in the spiritual realm to move, to be unlike each other, to not be alike, where they can't cooperate, where they can't work together. And so it's everything. This is a tremendous concept to get a hold of if we can ever get a hold of it. Everything we're doing, just like in this class right now, we are either putting forth something that is coming to us from the spiritual domains, the different spiritual worlds, or it's going back up the route. We are doing something that is going to motivate something in those spiritual realms to come together to do something. This is the idea. And if you ever get a hold of this idea, it's so important because it makes everything that we think, like the great Ramchal says, everything that we think, say, and do, suddenly it's no longer mundane. It's no longer meaningless. Everything has a meaning because everything is either an effect or it's a cause. And it's connected completely to the spiritual domain. Every thought that we think, every word that we say, everything that we do or don't do. And we better move on or I'll stay there for a while. Let's go on. But it's such an important concept to get a hold of. That's why we have to be responsible human beings and not do things without thinking, not do things without guidance, the guidance of the Torah. This is so important. Yeah. Loving people, he says, what kind of a person will be effective in bringing about harmony between people? Someone who loves people. Someone who seeks their best interest. Well, here again, we could stop right now. We could go to another huge, wonderful teaching from a great Kabbalist, Rabbi Yehuda Lev Ashlag, the Baal HaSulam, and go into his teaching concerning what is it that the great writing of the Zohar actually tells us, and that is number one, that we have a will to receive for ourselves alone. This is what separates us from God, and we have to do what? We have to do the hard work and get God's help in order to transform that will to receive for yourself alone into a will to receive in order to do what? In order to love other people, in order to seek their benefit, to give benefit to them, and to please Hashem. So I'm trying to integrate for you as we're going along all of these several years of really studying some of the sages and make it a part of us so that it becomes a part of who we are, and it greatly, greatly benefits our level of learning, and it greatly benefits other people. That's the point. So someone who loves people and seeks their best interest, he said, that's the person who will be effective. Only, he says, when we love people so genuinely that we feel at one with them, can we succeed in actually drawing people together to be at one with each other. He's telling a big secret here that I'm not sure I have the brains to comment on. But it's a big secret. This is the kind of person, there are some people who can reach that point, who love people, other people so genuinely. In other words, without any interest, self-interest in it, other than the fact that they love people and want to see them at peace instead of at war. These people can succeed in drawing people together, okay? And then finally he says, in bringing them closer to the Torah. Umer karban, excuse me, I'll get the Hebrew going in a minute. La Torah. I'll only say one thing, and then we'll move right along. Umer karban Korban is the exact same word for the word that's translated sacrifice. Okay? Very interesting. Where he's saying that, because it means, what does the word sacrifice in Hebrew actually mean? Korban means to come near to God. All right? So he is using this same word, saying bringing them close to the Torah. And he says, just as we should create harmony among people, so we should also create harmony and unity between Israel and their Father in heaven. And that is done by, how is that done? By drawing near those who are at a distance from God's Torah, okay? And if they're at a distance from the Torah, they're also at a distance from the mitzvot, from the commandments, the way to live. He says it's very clear that Hillel's advice is based on loving God's creation, which itself is founded on the love of God. If you love God, how can you not love what comes from Him, what He made, and it comes from Him? That's always the test. How can you not love other people? We can say that we love God, you know, and then not. No, I don't want to use the word "not like," because sometimes I also don't like other people. I'm bad about that, you know. In fact, Hillel is really getting after me here. But when I'm talking about hating or despising or doing ill, going out of your way to do ill to other people, how can you do that? If you do, you don't actually love God. That's the key. Exactly. Because he was a good Jewish rabbi. So he says exactly the same thing, yeah. As in the previous Mishnayot, he says, the first person who is mentioned of each pair of rabbis is the president, or the Nasi, the prince of the rabbinical court, meaning the Sanhedrin. And his advice addresses the love of God. Now he has a section here because he wants to talk about how Mishnah number 12 is going to relate to the following Mishnayot, to the following teachings from Hillel and also from Shammai. In this Mishnah, he says, Hillel advocates the pursuit of peace. In the following Mishnayot, he advises against. So in the first one, it's positive. These are things you should do. The next ones are going to be things that you shouldn't do, all right? And he advises against, number one, pursuing fame. He also cautions against benefiting from one's Torah scholarship. In other words, using it like a shovel. Okay? No, you don't understand? Using it in order to benefit only to yourself. It's not that a Torah scholar should not receive a benefit in the sense of I mean, this is what he does, and people should support him. You understand what I'm trying to say? But a great Torah scholar shouldn't take it and not be willing to share Torah with anyone for free. You see what I'm trying to say? The Torah is free. Torah students understand that the Torah scholar has to be supported. All right? But the Torah scholar should not come and make the Torah his merchandise. That's the idea. So against benefiting from one's Torah scholarship. And he accents personal accountability and responsibility. Oh, here comes this theme again that is not very popular among most people. He says, what is the connection between the statements of Hillel in this Mishnah that we just covered and those of the following teachings, Mishnayot? He says the Maharal says the flow of all of these Mishnayot from Hillel is based upon the theme of, in the English we use the word humility. In Hebrew it's anava. A humble male person is anav, okay? What?
Or mustard seed.
Right, it's the same concept. But what he's trying to say is the word in Hebrew isn't exactly the same meaning as what comes across into English. Read his note. He says, humility, he says, is an inadequate translation of the Hebrew word anava. Because anava, listen to the way he puts it, means that one considers other people important while not assessing his own importance. But other people are important, okay? But the English word humility, it really only conveys a negative, just a negative evaluation of yourself. In other words, you think you're a nobody. That's just half of it. That's really only half of what the Hebrew word is meaning. Rather than the positive, he says, evaluation of others that's implied by anava. So if we really want to get to the Hebrew thought behind any time we read this translation of humility, it's that I'm not important, but everyone else in the world is. Absolutely, because they are God's children, and because I love Him, I love them, is the idea. A person who loves peace, he says, and pursues peace, must be humble. And they must be anav, in other words. They must assess themselves as small and others as great. And unpretentious. And be able to go to the quarrelers, to the people who are fighting, because those quarrelers, boy, what a hard word. Sometimes he gives me really hard words to try to say. Those fighters, okay? We can always find a different word. They're not going to come to him on their own. So he has to pursue this. He has to chase it and try to fix it. All right? By contrast, a person who lacks humility, who is not anav, okay, they will consider it actually beneath their dignity to go and even try to reconcile them, to appeal to them in the pursuit of peace. I know exactly what he is saying. It's a very, very true thing. So humility, anava, is a prerequisite, he says, to loving humanity and to a concern for the total social harmony. And believe it or not, that's what the sages of Israel, this is what the Torah lays down for us. You know, at the risk, you know, of people shooting you, it lays down the rules for a social utopia. And of course somebody's going to say, oh, you mean socialism? In an extent, to some extent, where people care about each other. All right? Where people care about each other. And that's really the key to the whole system of everything. The deal is we have to have a king to force us to do this, or to teach us how to do it, and then to provide us with the proper motivation, okay, to get on a path like this. This is what the Mashiach will do to a certain extent. Yeah, but it's a society based on all of the values of the Torah, whether it's the written Torah or the oral Torah, is based on a society of loving God and loving people. That's it. Rabbi Yehuda Lev Ashlag, the Baal HaSulam, he mentions from time to time, can you consider what the world would be like if every other person in the world was looking out after you? Not themselves, but they were looking out after you. He said, you wouldn't go hungry. You would have a nice house. You would have everything that you needed. And because you're doing the same thing. You're not looking out for yourself, but you're providing and looking out for everybody else. That's the idea. But in order for that to happen, we have to have this transformation of the will to receive for yourself alone. Hillel himself, he says, was meek and humble. He was anav. His advice in the following Mishnayot continues to promote the quality of anava. He says, as he warns against the domineering character of those who seek fame and power, because that is the antithesis of anava, of humility. Okay, finally we come to Mishnah 13. I think we'll just be able to start it, and we'll have to finish it the next time. Still talking about Hillel and what he used to say. He used to say, in the translation here it says, he who seeks renown loses his reputation. He who does not increase, meaning his Torah learning, decreases it. And he who refuses to teach the Torah deserves the death penalty. And he who exploits, now this is the idea we were talking about earlier, exploits the crown of Torah, they will fade away. In other words, using the Torah like the crown of the Torah like it's a spade to dig in the ground, all right, to plant your potatoes, is the idea. Okay, let's go back. Page 45, on he who seeks renown loses his reputation. He says this translation that is in the book here, he who seeks renown loses his reputation, it follows the Rambam. It follows Maimonides' interpretation of the word Shema, okay, because it has to do with name. He who seeks his name, the verse is literally saying, if you seek a name, in other words, to have a big name among people, your name is eventually destroyed. All right? But this, on saying he who seeks renown loses his reputation, follows the Rambam, because he translates or interprets the word Shema as meaning reputation, a good name. He explains that once a person's fame has spread far and wide, that just that fame, that in itself is a harbinger or a messenger of imminent decline. You can't stay there forever. You will come down. This explanation, he says, is in accordance with the words. It's from Proverbs, chapter 16, verse 18. Pride goes before destruction, or I think it's usually translated a fall, but it's before this kind of avad, being destroyed. But the Maharal, he offers a different translation, because he understands the word Shema as Aramaic for name. And it is. I mean, it's not necessarily Aramaic, it's also Hebrew. Shem is name. So any variation on that is going to have to do something with name. And he understands, he says, negid, that's the first word, as a position of authority and power. And a negid is meaning that. It means a ruler, if you will. Therefore, the Maharal, he renders negid Shema, avad shmeh, as power. In other words, power is its name, destruction is its name. All right? That's the way he translates, the Maharal translates it. High office, he says, carries an aura of permanence and security. But the truth is, the Maharal says, that holding office leads to a person's ruin. As the rabbis have said, woe, and this is quoting from the Talmud, Pesachim 87b, woe to authority, for it buries those who hold it. We've already looked at this once. There is not a single prophet who did not outlive 4 kings. Okay? Now, the Maharal is going to come and explain to us the reason that authority buries those who hold it is that human beings receive life and support directly from God. May His name be blessed. He is Elokim Chaim, the God of life, the living God, the God of life, from whom life and sustenance flow towards all existence. And this is such a big lesson He's giving us here. But we're missing all the wonderful little details of it. But don't worry, eventually we're going to talk about them too, of how the shefa, the flow of bounty, comes to God, to everything in all of the spiritual universes and even into this physical universe. And so he says this flow comes from God towards all existence, and everyone who enters into this relationship on the receiving side, we receive that from Him as a humble dependent. If we know that that's where it's coming from, and we value ourselves as nothing and everybody else is something, and we are dependent upon God, he says that means that you are in fact worthy. Because of that, you are in fact worthy of receiving life from God. But by contrast, he says, on the other side of the coin, one who seeks power to rule, that's what he's talking about here, who seeks power to rule over another, just doesn't happen. They do not enter relationships in either a humble or a dependent role. but they enter into relationships in a dominant role. And that, the Maharal says, is not conducive to receiving life from its source. He's literally saying those people who are seeking authority to be dominant over others, they cut their life short because, or they make its quality much, much less, because they are not humble people, they are not anavim, okay? And that interrupts the flow of life coming from God to them. It's like a clogged artery. They clog it with their self.
And it could affect others.
Everything affects everything else.
Yeah.
Everything is connected. Another big secret. What a big secret, how everything is absolutely connected. Okay, let's go on. I keep trying to pull into some other area and we're not going to get very far in this, so we need to stay on track on the page for right now. And he who does not increase, decreases, and he who does not increase his learning of the Torah, in other words, advancement to another level of consciousness. And by the way, while we're taping this, we're at the very end of Rosh Chodesh Heshvan, the beginning of the month of Heshvan. And we need to, y'all know this teaching. Did we talk about it? Maybe we talked about it when we were in the Sukkah. Did we, about Rosh Hashanah? Rosh Hashanah, Reb Avraham Sutton, he gave this wonderful teaching on it, how it's called the head of the year. Rosh is literally head. Every month is called Rosh Chodesh, the head of the month, but Chodesh comes from the Hebrew letters Chet, Dalet, Shin, Chadash, which literally means new. So every month at Rosh Chodesh we get a new head. In other words, Hashem is giving a new level of consciousness to the world at the beginning of every month. It's divided into 12 pieces of it that He gives throughout the year, starting on Rosh Hashanah, the head of the year. And we have to be aware of it, and we have to be open to it, and to receive it from Him. So right now we're at the first or the second installment of the new head that He is giving for this year. So He says, he who doesn't increase his Torah learning decreases it. In contrast, He says, to power, which actually interferes with the flow of life from above, what does Torah study do? Torah study is the opposite. Torah study actually creates a bond with God, he says. Hence, the Torah is the substance of life, as it is said. And this is quoting from Devarim chapter 30 and verse 20. For it is your life and the length of your days. Therefore, one who does not continue to be occupied with Torah study, that also can make you die before your time. Yeah. Mankind's existence, he says, is inherently a physical one. It is finite and it is limited. But, listen to the Maharal. He's something, isn't he? He says, we can reverse this and acquire a spiritually intellectual existence, but it requires the hard work of laboring, of working in Torah study. The meaning of the Mishnah, he says, is this: one who does not work hard at making the intellectual component, meaning your Torah study, dominate the physical component, even if he studies Torah at his leisure, then he will suffer the finiteness of physical existence and therefore die earlier than his allotted time. It's very interesting what he is saying. If you don't work hard at your Torah study. And this is also related, by the way, to the passage in the Talmud and also in Pesakim. I can't remember the exact place, but where it says, Rabbi Yitzchak says, if a person comes and says, I did the hard work, but I didn't find, don't believe. If the person says, I didn't do the hard work, but nonetheless I found, don't believe. But if a person says, I did the hard work and I found, then believe. Very, very interesting. Oh, let me read this note in just the last 1 minute. He says, it seems that life that's being talked about here under discussion, he says, is actually a life of value. Death is not having value in life. However, he says there is still an implication at the literal level that actual longevity is associated with living a worthy life that is relative to one's potential lifespan. So the Maharal is talking like so many great sages do on more than one level at a time. He means several things at one time. So it has to do with quality of life, the value of life, all of those things. Okay, we'll stop right here. We'll start right here the very next time. That's okay with you? It better be because we're out of time. Okay, so shalom uvracha, peace and the blessing. Bye.